loud. If they were to speak these words, they could listen to another woman on the torture table. What else can they do? One of the most emotional moments of my career was actually performing this song in the stadium where Pinochet's troops had murdered thousands of young people. Performing in that stadium with the mothers on stage and actually dancing with them all, Peter Gabriel and myself, just danced with all of these women. And it'd be very difficult to top that for an emotional experience. I mean, it was just bizarre that I'd written this song and then it had become a kind of reality that was very powerful for me, and I think very powerful for everyone watching. That's one of the memories I will take to my grave. I think the first occasion that I was involved with Amnesty was in the 70s. I was asked to play at the Secret Policeman's Ball, which is an annual event run by the British chapter of Amnesty. It was a mixture of sort of people playing their songs acoustically with some comedy sketches, you know. And it took place at the famous Drury Lane Theatre in London. That was really my first awareness of Amnesty's work, which, you know, involves the writing of letters to try and encourage governments to treat their prisoners of conscience fairly. In fact, that they wouldn't be prisoners anymore just for their political or their religious beliefs. The 70s was a time of the disappearances where vast numbers of women, children, men were simply vanished by the security forces. This happened in Chile, it happened in Argentina, and Amnesty did a lot of work to expose this dirty war, as it was known. I got to hear about some of the relatives of these people who'd been disappeared, the mothers of the disappeared, who'd organized themselves into a very powerful group, calling themselves the Los Madres de los Desaparecidos. And in Chile, they would do this amazing dance outside of government buildings called the cueca, which is traditionally a folk dance for a man and a woman, courting dance. And they would dance it on their own, but with photographs of their missing husbands or sons pinned to their arms. These people never knew whether their loved ones were dead or just been imprisoned somewhere. That feeling of not knowing, complete torture. I suppose the nearest thing would be the missing in action people from the Vietnam War in America. But I thought that was a very powerful metaphor that would mean something to everyone everywhere, and so I wrote the song They Dance Alone and trying to explain the situation.
thing.
Wow. What can I say?
That's all right.
I mean, boy, that's just, geez, like, if you love somebody.
Right.
Right. That's great. That's God. That's just. If you love somebody. If you love somebody. You know?
Yeah, that's the way it goes.
Set them free. Set them free. Free. Set them free. Free. Set them.
Johnny's in the basement mixing up the medicine. I'm on the pavement thinking about the government. The man in a trench coat, badge out, laid off, says he's got a bad cough, wants to get it paid off. Look out, kid, it's something you did. God knows when, but you're doing it again. You better duck down the alleyway looking for a new friend. The man in a coonskin cap and a pig pen wants $11 bills. You only got 10.
And I play if you have the money, or if you're a friend to me. But the one-man band by the quick lunch stand, he was playing real good for free.
I've seen fire and I've seen rain. I've seen sunny days that I thought would never end. I've seen lonely times when I could not find a friend. But I always thought that I'd see you again.
James Taylor again is one of those people who I owned every record he ever made and learnt every song he ever wrote. So it's kind of strange to now work with the man and sing with the man and have him as a friend of mine who comes around to the house and we talk about stuff. It's very funny when your heroes become your friends. It's wonderful. Miles Davis once came to see me and told me I had the biggest head in the world. That's what he said. Sting, you got the biggest fucking head in the world. I said, really, what do you mean, Miles? He said, I saw a movie and you were in it, and Your head filled the whole fucking screen. And that was a very mild sort of statement, you know, sort of logical but illogical at the same time. I still have his number in my phone book, and I'll always keep it, even though he's not here. It's nice to have Miles Davis's phone number in your book. If the Beatles made me want to become a pop singer, it was Hendrix who made me want to become a musician, because he combined being a popular artist with being a serious virtuoso musician. I saw him, I must have been 14, in my hometown. Hey Joe had just come out, and I bought that, and they came to the town almost the next week, and I'd never seen somebody play that way or look like the way he did, and I suppose it completely changed my life. I suppose being having have a very wide range in my voice. I can sing very high and quite low. So in many ways, female singers were an influence on my work as much as male singers, you know, and someone like Joni Mitchell who sang very high, or Cleo Lane, or people like that, or you know, real jazz singers like Ella Fitzgerald, were people who entered my consciousness and entered my vocal style, I suppose. Bob Dylan was again a major influence on my life, because after the Beatles came Bob Dylan for me as a lyricist. This amazing stream of consciousness that he could somehow turn on and turn out so many songs, one after the other. It was just, I don't know where it came from. It was sort of God-given, you know. Not that I ever would hope to emulate Bob Dylan, but I could play and sing a lot of his songs as a 15-year-old, 14-year-old boy. So if I have to you know, compile a top 10 favorite records of all time for me, I always put, and I've been asked this a lot, I always put Dock of the Bay by Otis Redding first. There's something about that song and the way he sings it that really moves me. And it's not just the fact that he died fairly soon after that recording was made. There's something very mournful and touching about that song. And I mean, he was known really for sort of really sort of aggressive, soulful, loud performances. But this was a very sensitive song, you know, and I love the whistling at the end. That moves me. I don't know why.
Now I'm just gonna sit at the dock of the bay, watching the tide roll away. Ooh, I'm sitting on the dock of the bay, wasting time.
Ray Brown was one of the most famous jazz bass players who was influential in my life in that he published a book of double bass exercises, which are incredibly difficult. But once you've gone through the book, and there are probably 70, 80 pages of excruciatingly difficult scales and arpeggios, you can play the bass, basically. And playing the double bass is a little bit like it's an athletic pursuit. You know, you really need to build up the muscles and play every day. I don't play it every day, but in my youth, I really recommended the Ray Brown double bass book. It's good for bass guitar too. It's very good for bass guitar to get your chops together. Prokofiev is someone who straddled not only the Soviet world but also the Western culture too. He worked in America. But I always loved the suite for Lieutenant Kijé, and stole directly a theme from the middle of that piece called the Love Theme, and I used it as the basis of my song The Russians. I was quite open about this. I said, you know, this is written by Prokofiev, and thanks very much. But I think I have to pay the estate of Prokofiev something for that. But it just sort of summed up a lot of my feelings about Russia, this sort of huge, expansive country with a great deal of emotion. Gil Evans was someone whose music I got to know through listening to Miles Davis. Gil Evans was an arranger, originally born in Canada, and he arranged Miles's recording of Gershwin's Porgy and Bess and Sketches of Spain, which was based on the Concerto de Aranjuez, which is a classical Spanish piece of music. And he is known as the genius of jazz arranging. It's a bit of a tautology, because jazz music is essentially improvised music. But what Gil did was arrange frames within which musicians could improvise. In many ways, he influenced me in that I'm not a jazz musician. I don't improvise, but I like to do the same thing. I like to create a framework within which musicians can explore the music themselves or paint their own colors within a fairly structured setting. So he was an influence on me in that sense. I suppose that the Beatles are the reason I'm a musician, in many ways. That they're an English band. They came from a town in the north of England, and they wrote their own songs. So I suppose so many bands come from England because of the Beatles. You know, they were a success, so we could try the same thing, and a lot of us did. I just think they were the best band around, you know, still are. Their music is still listenable, it's still relevant, it's still inspiring. I can't really overpraise the Beatles. I owe them a lot. I actually performed a couple of Beatles songs live. I did Penny Lane and A Day in the Life. Penny Lane was written by McCartney, I think. Day in the Life was mainly written by John Lennon. Both songs reveal the differences in those two personalities. And I suppose it's the purpose of a songwriter, really, to blend the Lennon with the McCartney, the sort of dark cynicism with the sort of uplifting, happy-go-lucky vibe that McCartney had. They needed each other. They needed that balance, you know. And to have a songwriting partner is something I've never had. I've never really written songs with anyone else. And I've always envied that relationship. It must be nice. Antonio Carlos Jobim was known as Tom to his friends, and I was lucky enough to be able to call him Tom. In the last few years, I worked with him a number of times. We shared two things: one, a love of Brazilian music, and two, a love of Brazilian rainforest. He would always tell me that he was by birth Indian, that he had Indian blood in his veins, and he loved the forest, and was also very worried about what was happening to it. But I worked with him a couple of times singing his songs. In fact, I'm on his last record singing a song called Insensitivo. Jobim was probably the most famous exponent of the bossa nova in the 60s, which again is pop music, but it's pop music based on a sort of classical tradition. He's a very sophisticated musician. Branford Marsalis is someone that I met, I think, in 85. So Branford and I have known each other for 10 years. He'd just left his brother's band. He was in Wynton Marsalis's band. He was the tenor sax player. And again, with me, he shared this idea that music shouldn't be ghettoized. You know, he's a jazz player, but that's not all there is to him. He plays classical music. He plays pop music. He even played heavy metal music. I mean, he's that kind of guy. So he was perfect for me in that he could play anything, and didn't have this prejudice about different kinds of music. He's not a purist in that sense, even though he can play. The jazz he plays is just as pure as anybody else's. But he's interested in the whole spectrum of music, the whole variety, which is what it's exciting about it, you know. Weather Report created fantastic music that you couldn't really categorize as jazz or pop or anything. It was just Weather Report, and had some terrific musicians, some of which I inherited. Omar Hakim was a drummer in Weather Report, also worked with me for a while. Someone who was a friend of mine who died tragically was Jaco Pastorius, probably the greatest bass guitarist ever. He's never been surpassed as far as I'm concerned. And I love there's a song on Heavy Weather called Teen Town, which is basically a bass solo, which is a revelation. He was an incredible player.
Channel 6's own Krusty the Clown has gathered members of the entertainment community, who normally steer clear of fashionable causes, for a video called We're Sending Our Love Down the Well.
Yeah, I used to open for Krusty in '69. In fact, he fired me, as I recall.
Sting.
But this isn't about show business. This is about some kid down a hole or something, and we've all got to do what we can. There's a hole in my heart, as deep as a well, for that poor little boy who's stuck halfway to hell.
No, we can't get him out. We'll do the next best thing.
We'll go on TV and sing, sing, sing.
And we're sending our love down the well.
All the way down.
We're sending our love down the well.
Down that well.
Sting, you sang about the message in the bottle. Now, what sort of a bottle was it?
A ketchup bottle.
Right. Sting, when you was it screw top or cork? Oh, David.
It was a screw top oven.
Right. Screw. Right. Sting, when you go back to your flat at night and get in a lift to go up to it, do you write on the lift wall Sting or Mr. Sting?
I usually just write Sting.
Right. Would it be all right to use a gin bottle?
No.
No. Will you stop going on about bottles? Honestly, Dick.
Right.
Now, Sting, if you got an itchy bottom at night, right, would you rub it on your wife's chin? Would you put your bottom out of the window to blow it off with the breeze? Or would you pick at it with your fingers? What's this about?
Channel 6's own Krusty the Clown has gathered members of the entertainment community, who normally steer clear of fashionable causes, for a video called We're Sending Our Love Down the Well.
Yeah, I used to open for Krusty in '69. In fact... Film is a strange medium, you know, because you can have a great script and great actors and a great director, but it's a bit like betting on the horses, you know. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. I suppose that's the magic of it. It's a risk. It's always a risk. It's a house of cards. One thing out of place, the whole thing collapses.
Chin up, old pal.
Thank you, Matt. That's very nice of you.
Yes, it was from the heart. So like I say, keep your chin up. I mean, keep it up all night if you can.
You shut your hole. You saved those dirty jokes for your kitty. Only a slut likes that stuff.
Matt, don't be vulgar.
See here, you can't call my kitty a slut. You... Oh.
Go on. What else can't I do?
The formula is really very simple. Just follow the rules and you will see
And as life travels on and things do go wrong, just follow steps 1, 2, and 3. Well, that sure sounds like heaven to me.
The first film I ever made was called Radio On, and it was made by the British Film Institute, directed by a man called Chris Pettit. It also starred Ian Dury of the Blockheads, and I played a garage attendant, petrol attendant, who was obsessed with Eddie Cochran, and who actually worked in a garage near where Eddie Cochran was killed in England. Eddie Cochran was killed in a car crash on the way back from a concert in Bristol. So the garage I worked at was right next to the accident site, and spent the whole day playing Eddie Cochran songs in the movies. Threepenny Opera was a Broadway production of a Bertolt Brecht Kurt Weill play from the 1920s, which we brought to the Luntfontein Theatre off Broadway, and I think we ran for about 6 or 7 weeks. I had the time of my life. I actually missed doing that job. I loved singing and I loved acting on stage. Much more fun than filming, because as a live audience, it's over as soon as you've done it. Nobody's recording it. And actually the most fun was getting laughs. Making people laugh en masse is something that's very exciting, and it's a kind of addiction, you know. I look forward to those moments when you get a laugh every night. It's very strange to make a movie in my hometown. I kept thinking of myself as a schoolboy, imagining that I would never have thought in the 20 years, 30 years on, I would be in a film in my hometown with a film crew and everything, and American movie stars. It was all kind of a fantasy, really.
Sign, please.
Shouldn't have damaged the desk. Shouldn't have done that. Gormenghast was made as a radio play for the BBC, and was probably the best medium for that particular piece of work, because it allowed the listener to create his own landscape, largely the way a reader would in the novel, rather than have masses of models and matching together all kinds of false images. I think radio is a fantastic and underused medium, and very powerful medium, that I'd actually like to do it again. It was closer to making records than anything else. And there's a wonderful, when you have a large cast in a radio play, there are wonderful moments where there's one microphone, each person has a script, and you have to turn it over very carefully so no one hears. But there's a kind of elaborate ritualistic dance, and it's your turn to go to the mic. You're behind the next person, and it's like a snake weaving around the studio. If there's a fight scene, there's a guy on the floor fighting himself with chains and punching himself and screaming. It's hilarious. Someone should film a radio play, actually.
What are you doing here? In my attic? This is my room. My room.
Lady Fuchsia.
Go away. Go away from my room. I hate you. I hate you for coming here. No one has ever been here.
Today, I saw a great pavement among the clouds, made of grey stones, bigger than a meadow.
What do you want?
I saw a horse swimming in the top of a tower, and colonies of basking lizards.
Who are you?
My name is Steerpike. I've climbed here from below.
Climbed here?
I come for sanctuary. I'm a rebel. I'm at your service as a dreamer and a man of action. I've climbed for hours, and I'm hungry and thirsty.
Go. Go away from me.
Where can I go to? Hide me tonight, Lady Fuchsia, and introduce me, if you will, to someone who can employ me. All I want is one interview. My brains will do the rest. Trudy, my wife, and myself bought the rights to this story and developed the script and got the director. Trudy produced it, and we ended up making this film in the wilds of England in this old country house. We're very proud of it in that really for the first time we were in charge. We could say what was on the screen and what wasn't on the screen. So in a way we could take the full blame if it doesn't work, or indeed the full praise if it does. And I prefer it that way. Young Mr. Sidney's body has been found.
Oh, my God.
His condition is apparently remarkable.
Well, go on, go on, go on.
He's been reduced to bones, butchered and gnawed.
Butchered and what, Fletch?
Butchered by men.
Yes.
And gnawed by pigs. Quadrophenia was based on an album by The Who, largely about the phenomenon known as the mods in England. I was never a mod. I was a little too young to be a mod, but I certainly remembered the battles that were fought every summer between the rockers who had motorcycles, and you'd call them greasers in America, and the mods who were sort of dandified hipsters, you know. And they'd have these running battles every summer in all of our seaside towns with the police joining in, and it was terrible trouble. But it's really about the coming of age of a mod and what he goes through. I play his hero, who ends up having feet of clay.
Came to Brighton with the avowed intent of interfering with the life and property of its inhabitants. Insofar as the law gives us power, this court will not fail to use the prescribed penalties. It may perhaps discourage you and others of your kidney who are infected with this vicious virus that you'll be ordered to pay a fine of £75.
I'll pay now if you don't mind.
I'd never read Dune, and I was in the film, and I still don't understand it. We spent months in Mexico in a place called Churubusco Studios, and ridiculously hot weather. I was wearing a rubber suit for 7 weeks, which there was no way you could breathe. And I think I weighed about 140 pounds at the end of it. And I was like a stick man. They dyed my hair red. The Mexican crew would call me Woody Woodpecker, because I had all this red hair. And it's a bizarre movie. It was directed by David Lynch, and this is before Twin Peaks and after The Elephant Man. And I mean, a lot of people who really love Dune love the film, and they love the book, and it escapes me. It really escapes me. I don't really understand it. Unless it's about drugs. Maybe it's about drugs.
Why prolong the inevitable? I will kill you! I will kill him!
The Bride was again directed by Frank Rodden, who directed Quadrophenia, and he thought it would be a great idea if I played Baron Frankenstein or Frankenstein or whatever. And it was supposed to be the sequel to The Bride of Frankenstein. Not a terribly successful movie. I mean, it was a sort of charming little story, but didn't quite work somehow. I mean, I was the most experienced actor in the cast, which we should have told it. They should have got some more experienced actors. Probably me as well, but no, I learned something from it. It was fun to do.
It's true I made you to mate with that abortion. But I quickly saw the foolishness of that. I thought you were fit for finer things.
What do you mean?
I taught you many things, Eva. I made you my equal in thought and reasoning. The last thing I meant to teach you was to love. But you nearly jumped the gun. Except that I caught you.
Plenty starred Meryl Streep and was based on a David Hare play about basically the Second World War and the dissolution of the British Empire after that. And I played one of Meryl Streep's lovers, which I thought was an amazing way to make a living, you know, get paid for simulating lovemaking with Meryl Streep.
Why me?
I like you.
And?
I love you. I chose you because I don't see you very much. Barely ever see you. We live at opposite ends of town. It's different worlds.
Different class.
Yes, that comes into it.
can't come in here yet, come back later. I don't know where people get this impression about medievalism in my work at all. I think I'm really contemporary and up to the minute, you know, but I quite like wearing the clothes, except they're a little hot. Let me just get this chainmail glove off here. No, I don't see myself as a medievalist at all. Although it's a period of time that I'm kind of interested in. I suppose being English, you grow up in an environment that is sort of steeped in the stuff, you know. In England, we actually have castles that aren't made of fiberglass, you know. Every town has its remnants of the medieval era, if not long before that, you know, Romans and ancient Britons and Neolithic man. All of these sort of monuments exist within modern English life. So, but I don't think it's ever permeated my my music. Although, when I think about it, I suppose one of my earliest musical memories is Gregorian chant in church, you know, learning the credo in Latin and stuff like that. So maybe I'm fooling myself, but it's not something I really want to peddle. I mean, I couldn't go out in this very easily without a horse. No cries of pity. The siege guns have been pounding through the night. It took a day to build the city. We walked through its streets in the afternoon. As I returned across the fields I'd known, I recognized the walls that I'd once made. Had to stop in my tracks for fear of walking on the mines I laid. And if I built this fortress around your heart, encircled you with riches and barbed wire, and let me build a bridge, or I can build a chasm, and let me settle
my tracks for fear of walking on the mines I laid. And if I built this fortress around your heart and circled you in trenches and barbed wire, let me build a bridge for a cannot fill your chasm. Let me set the battlements on fire.
Fortress Around Your Heart was written in the studio in '85, I think, in Barbados. I'd just been playing around with those chords on the guitar, those strange modal chords. They sounded kind of medieval, actually. And so I got into a whole sort of line of thinking about medieval sieges, you know, castle walls and siege guns and armies sleeping under tattered flags, and thought it was a nice metaphor for sort of love gone wrong, armies fighting each other, relationships having collapsed and gone from bad to worse, and what started as love ends as war. The structure of the song, it's not one of the songs that lends itself to changing much. We play it the way it was written. It's an odd structure. It doesn't have a bridge. But I suppose that's symbolic in itself, you know, saying there was no bridge between these relationships. That's purely accidental, of course, but the song doesn't have a bridge, therefore isn't the standard pop song. It's supposed to have bridges, some sort of release, but this song was just locked verse, chorus, verse, chorus, verse, chorus, coda. Maybe with a bridge it would have been a bigger hit, but it's what it is. Cameras, to me, are always a potential threat. You know, it's a prying eye, so I can stare just as intently as a camera lens can, you know. There was no intent to intimidate or seduce. I sometimes write songs on the piano, but I'm a terrible piano player. I just these big hands. But sometimes I come up with stuff, you know, it's very simple stuff. Example, this one. This was the basis of a song called If You Love Somebody, Set Them Free. If you need somebody, call my name. If you want someone, you can do the same. So I wrote that, and then a couple of years later, I was just playing the same thing, but I changed it around, and the same riff became Englishman in New York. modular system. You can just steal bits from your old songs and modify them slightly and just move them one step on, even with just a few simple colors. But, it's not cheating, it's just playing, you know. I've been down so long, being down don't bother me. I'm gonna take all my troubles, drown them in the deep blue sea. I work hard every day, I come straight home at night, no matter how hard I try to please her. So just don't treat me right, I've been down so long. Being down don't bother me. I'm gonna take all my troubles, drown them in the deep blue sea. This is an old German double bass. It's several hundred years old, and I often wonder about all the music that's been played on it. You know, what kinds of music? Classical music, I suppose, and jazz, music hall, who knows? I think playing the double bass is more of an athletic pursuit than actually music. It takes a lot of strength to play, and you have to play every day. It's like tennis, but I don't play every day, so. I like to doodle now and then, you know. It's an old cigar advert. Remember that one? But I used to use this on tour, but my fingers get very sore, so I don't. And it's too big. It's not very portable, you know. So it sits in my room here now. Songwriting, I suppose it is a function of being able to play an instrument, and I've always been able to play the guitar. Not very well. I mean, I'm really a bass player, but I've got big, gnarly fingers that don't really suit the Spanish guitar, but I do like the Spanish guitar. And I suppose I write when I doodle. I just doodle around on the guitar and I'll come up with some tune. I don't know, and I build it up. I suppose one of my most successful tunes was Message in a Bottle, which started off as a doodle. Tape recorder, and then I worked out a sort of harmony to the part which went.
together. Love can mend your life, but love can break your heart. I'll send an SOS to the world. I'll send an SOS to the world. I hope that someone gets mine. I hope that someone gets mine. I hope that someone gets my message in a bottle. Yeah. Message in a bottle. Message in a bottle. Message in a bottle. Walked out this morning. I don't believe what I saw. 100 billion bottles washed up on the shore. Seems I'm not alone in being alone. 100 billion cast away, looking for a home. I'll send an SOS to the world. I'll send an SOS to the world. I hope that someone gets mine. I hope that someone gets mine. I hope that someone gets my message in a bottle. Message in a bottle, yeah. Message in a bottle, yeah. Message in a bottle. Sending out an SOS. 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 All right. I suppose William is one of my children too, you know, he's, except he's a dog, but he's been very close to me for the past 12 years. He means a lot to me. He's my alter ego. Part of my education at school was to read The Portrait of an Artist as a Young Man, which is really about Catholic education in Ireland. And being brought up Catholic myself, I related to a lot of the fire and brimstone and the guilt. That was really the subject matter of that book. I went on to read Ulysses,
I still don't understand Finnegan's Wake, I have to be honest with you. I've tried to read it a number of times, but I just find it too dense. I'm told that you should just have fun with it. You know, it's wordplay, and it's like music. My favorite book of Gabriel Garcia Marquez is 100 Years of Solitude. For some reason, when I finished that book, I wept. It just made me very tearful. It was one of the books I didn't want to finish. I just wanted to keep living in this novel. And I suppose I always look for that now in novels, to make me do that, to make me tearful, to make me emotional and cry. I think it's much easier in movies to do that because you have music going and you have acting. But in a novel, just to do it with words, to make people feel something deep inside, to well up that way, is a wonderful talent. And particularly when it can be translated into English from the Spanish and still mean something wonderful.
You see me walking down Fifth Avenue, a walking cane here at my side.
I was approached to appear in An Englishman in the videotape of, which is part of Nothing Like the Sun, I believe, and is one song in it, and I was asked to be in it, so I went to West Broadway, and people who've seen the videotape say, "You looked so cold." And I was so cold because it was February and I walked up and down West Broadway, lurched up and down. I had terrible rheumatism, so I lurched up and down West Broadway, clutching onto my coat and my scarf and my hat because of the wind. And that's all I remember. Just a few tottering steps in the snow.
Quentin Crisp is he's a very special man, a very heroic man in many ways. He's probably one of the most famous gays of the 20th century. And he was openly gay at a time when, one, it was a criminal offense. Two, it was very dangerous to proclaim yourself gay. And he's a hero. I mean, to meet the man now, and he's very old now, he still has an amazing storytelling ability, an amazing grace, an amazing dignity. And I wrote a song called Englishman in New York about him. I think he moved to New York when he was in his 70s and lives in the Bowery, which is a pretty heavy area. Is celebrated as the hero that he is. You know, he's a man who's himself. Be yourself no matter what they say, and he was one of those people. Arthur Koestler was a Hungarian emigre who ended up living in England. He was a great popularizer of people like Carl Jung. He popularized very sort of complex East European, dense intellectual ideas. The first book I read of him was called The Act of Creation, which is basically, it's a very thick tome, scientific tome about laughter and why we laugh at certain things, what the mechanics of a joke are, which I found very interesting. It's not a very funny book, to be quite honest, but deeply interesting. He also wrote Ghost in the Machine, which it's really about what we are. Are we just machines? Are we just a molecular pattern? Or is this just consciousness exists somewhere else? Is mind different from the brain? I happen to believe it has to be. You know, if you arrange a load of milk cartons in a certain way, they don't have consciousness, nor do our atoms. From somewhere else, we have consciousness. Now, I mean, that's my only religious belief, that we are more than we seem. Jeff Schumacher is probably most famous for writing Small is Beautiful, which is a treatise really against the idea of big is better, you know, sort of corporations and massive nation states. I suppose it's really about village life, you know, and small communities that are self-sufficient. He also wrote a wonderful book called Guide for the Perplexed, which I suppose is about the need for spirituality, how that we haven't really replaced that in our society at all well. We have a lot of empty churches. Society has had religion since there's been society, and now suddenly we feel confident enough not to have any kind of religion, really. Or we replace it with consumer fetishism, which is another kind of religion. But Guide for the Perplexed is a very logical explanation of the spiritual life, without being preachy or threatening about eternity. Shakespeare, I suppose, was the literary equivalent to a Mozart. He just seemed to spew out beautiful language, like he couldn't help it. And, the number of works that are attributed to his name is quite phenomenal. I suppose it's like Bob Dylan, he was channeling something. Every line of Shakespeare has just so much valency and so much depth. It's quite difficult to comprehend that talent, or whatever it was. So I've taken it upon myself to freely, rob Shakespeare whenever I can. There's some wonderful lines that you can just rob him wholesale. He's in the public domain, So it's always good to throw the odd bit of the bard in. I think you're allowed to do that if you're English. Nabokov, I'm probably the only person in songwriting who's Nabokov's name in a pop song. It's caused an awful amount of trouble, People would write letters and say, "What's a Nabokov?" or "How dare you sully the name of this great Russian author with a pop song?" or "How dare you be so pretentious to rhyme Nabokov with Nastikov?" or something. I forget what the rhyme was. I think it was cough, actually. Shake and cough rhymed with Nabokov. I just think it's funny. He wrote Lolita, which is the story of middle-aged lust, and youthful beauty. I quite like the idea of literary references in songs. It doesn't do anybody any harm. Maybe a few people read Lolita because it was mentioned in a song. Who knows? The first book I read from cover to cover, I was 7 years old. I remember this. I was very proud of the fact that I'd read Treasure Island by Robert Louis Stevenson. My comprehension of it, I'm sure, was limited, but I read every word on every page and was very proud of that. I maintain some memories of it, I suppose, a sort of sympathy with pirates. I think I've become a modern-day pirate in many ways. The idea of hidden gold and the black spot and life on the high seas has always appealed to me. I suppose if I had to choose another period, I suppose that would be it, really. The Spanish Main would be for me. Geoffrey Chaucer was something that all English school children have to read. It's written in Middle English, which was very close to German, and it's the way people spoke in the 13th century, the 14th century. It's related to modern English, but it looks like a foreign language, and when you're 12 years old, it might as well be in Mongolian. But you plough through it, and you plough through his most famous work, the Canterbury Tales. One of his most famous tales is the Summoner's Tale. The Summoner is where my surname is Sumner, which has been sort of shortened. And the Summoner's Tale is mainly about farting, I think. It's a very anti-religious tale. He has a running battle with the monk, who's also one of the pilgrims. and it's about the corruption in the church, basically, and farting. So I called my last album The 10 Summoners' Tales. It was a sort of mild joke. People took it far too seriously, as always. T.S. Eliot is probably the most English of American poets. He was a sort of Englishman by choice, even though he was born in Illinois or somewhere like that. I think The Wasteland is a poem that we, again, in English school, we have to sort of learn by heart. But I suppose it's the poetry of alienation and desolation. I think it's closely linked to Samuel Beckett's work, the Waiting for Godot, that landscape of total war, the landscape of complete desolation, and where does that leave man? Again, I can't point to an influence in my work at all and say, well, that was influenced by T.S. Eliot, but I'm sure that, that all this stuff goes in and comes out somewhere. Cormac McCarthy is someone I discovered quite recently. I read All the Pretty Horses, and again, it's a very beautiful and sustained poem set in Texas in the 40s. It's about two young cowboys who ride into Mexico across unfenced land. That was the last time in history when you could do that, when you could ride for hundreds of miles without seeing a fence. Again, it's one of those books that can make you cry, that can touch something deep inside you, and it's very hard to explain what that is, but I think it's the power of words. Some of it's written in Spanish, and he has this wonderful reservoir of vocabulary that's Spanish, English. It's all about horses and the technicalities of horsemanship and being a cowboy. It's a wonderful vocabulary. Paul Bowles hasn't written very many books, but he wrote a book called The Sheltering Sky, which became a film by Bertolucci a few years ago. And I read it long before it was a film, but it's one of the most beautiful, sustained, poetic novels I've ever read. It's about Americans who regard themselves as travelers and not tourists, and I class myself in that category. I'm a hopeless tourist, but I'm constantly on the move. But there was a story within that story that was sort of an Arab legend that was told in the story of three sisters who invite some prince to a tea party out in the desert. They have tea in the Sahara, I think. They have tea and it's wonderful, and he promises to come back, and he never does. They just wait and wait and wait until it's too late. I just loved this story and wrote a song called Tea in the Sahara. I don't know whether Paul Bowles ever heard it, probably not, but still one of my favorite songs.
I always considered myself fairly skeptical about mumbo jumbo, and I never really believed in things like tarot cards, except I had a friend who knew a bit about them and actually made a living as a psychic advisor. He taught me how to read tarot cards, and he taught me the symbols and the way the spread works. And, it's a purely academic interest. I took this information in and then started to play with the cards and ask questions. And somehow the cards would answer in a very coherent way. I mean, there's no scientific basis for this at all. It just allows you to look at your life, or to look at the life of someone else, and use the cards as a sort of context for thought or meditation. It's no more than that. There's nothing creepy about it. It's just a way of dealing with things, and an enjoyable one.
Carl Jung was a Swiss psychologist, I suppose you'd call him, who developed a dream theory after Freud. He worked with Freud but parted the ways with him. And he's probably most known for his theory of synchronicity, which is a theory of meaningful coincidence. I mean, all of us have examples in our lives of coincidences. You know, you meet someone someplace and their father knew your father, or everyone has examples of this. Jung managed to sort of weave a theory around the meaning of these things. Somehow existence was kind of holographic and everything was connected to everything else, and that there were no real accidents. Everything had a sort of meaning. As an artist, as a writer, I think it's good to embrace this kind of thing because it means that any observation you make has some sort of meaning. It has to. Carl Jung came along in my reading at a time when I probably needed it. I was in the first flush of success with a band called The Police. It was the most successful time in my life and probably the most unhappy. I was miserable. Everything was going right for me, and yet my life was falling apart at the seams. And this book just sort of coincidentally just turned up, and I started to read it, and I started to analyze my dreams. I ended up going to a Jungian analyst to try and figure out what the hell I was doing, or who I was, or where I'd been, and I found it very useful. I sort of channeled all of this information into my songs, starting to use dream imagery in my work, and it was fun. That's all I can say. Whether it was therapeutic, I don't know, but it was fun. And I'm here now, and I'm reasonably sane 20 years later, and I think Carl Jung can take responsibility for that. I'm really fond of the idea of optimism as regards the future. I think it's necessary for us to be optimistic about the future because the alternative is actually unthinkable. There's a lot of doom and gloom, and a lot of people have this idea that, you know, the world's going to end in 99 or whatever, you know. This is an apocalyptic idea that we're going to be heading for St. John's apocalypse, and it's all tied in with basic fear. And not being a fearful person, I feel optimistic about the future. I think that's what we do. Buckminster Fuller is one of those people who are optimistic, who had ideas about sharing resources and about using resources for the whole world, as opposed to just selfishly trying to hoard them for ourselves. And he's an important author from that point of view. Interview with a Vampire by Anne Rice was another book that was just given to me. Somebody just handed it to me after a gig or something. I think I was in New Orleans. We were staying in the French Quarter in a hotel, and I started to read this book late one night. It was one of those books I read in one sitting, you know. I was totally enchanted by this story. Not so much by the character Lestat, who everybody seemed to like, but the other character, the Louis character, interested me far more. He seemed to be much more reflective and much more interesting in a way. And I wrote Moon Over Bourbon Street based on that reading, you know, that it was the idea of being a vampire and being a predator, but regretting it all the time, and knowing that there's something morally wrong with your lusts, your hunger. And I loved that struggle that was going on in that character's head. There was a kind of movement that there were people who thought that Lestat, who then became a rock star in previous and resulting books, was based on me, which he wasn't the character I was interested in at all. Mervyn Peake is again, it was a book that was given to me, kind of synchronicity. You know, somebody just handed a book to me called Titus Groan by Mervyn Peake, and I'd never heard of Mervyn Peake. And I started to read this book, and I couldn't put it down, and then I read the second book of the trilogy, which was called Gormenghast, and then I read the third book called Titus Alone, and just fell in love with this world that the man had created, a sort of gothic world based on a castle with an ancient history. And I eventually ended up buying the film rights to this book and meeting Mervyn Peake's widow in London and trying to get a movie made of this book. I failed in that. What I did do was, with the BBC, I made a radio play, which actually satisfied my need much more than a film would have done, because radio is a medium where the imagination is brought into play much more. You have to imagine vast distances. You have to imagine impenetrable darkness. If you close your eyes, the words create that. So in many ways, it was the perfect medium for Gormenghast.
I have a print of a very famous Renaissance painting called The Annunciation, which was painted by Fra Angelico. I always found the Annunciation a very magical happening. You know, the Virgin Mary is visited by an angel, a being from another dimension. That's always excited me. It's a nice painting. Agnes is my rather famous grandmother. In fact, people know me as Agnes's grandson rather than Sting. She's 89. She had 3 heart attacks about 2 weeks ago and is up and kicking the next day. She's that kind of person. She'll survive all of us, I'm sure. And she was on their way down to stay with us, and she was late. And we were a bit worried about it, and we got a phone call in the middle of the night. I said, "Where are you, Agnes?" She said, "Well, I'm on the train." I said, "Well, how are you talking to me on the train?" She says, "Well, there's a man." Agnes is my rather famous grandmother. In fact, people know me as Agnes's grandson rather than Sting. She's 89. She had 3 heart attacks about 2 weeks ago and is up and kicking the next day. She's that kind of person. She'll survive all of us, I'm sure. And she was on their way down to stay with us, and she was late. And we were a bit worried about it, and we got a phone call in the middle of the night. I said, "Where are you, Agnes?" She said, "Well, I'm on the train." I said, "Well, how are you talking to me on the train?" She says, "Well, there's a man next to me with a cellular phone." She said, "The train caught fire, and we're stuck on the line here. And they put the fire out, but we're stuck, you know. This is the middle of the night." So I was writing a song at the time, a tune, and I ended up calling it Agnes and the Burning Train. I gave her a sainthood, so I called it Saint Agnes and the Burning Train. Rose is my grandfather's sister, and she was a music hall singer in the earlier part of the century. And she has a great rivalry with Agnes. It was in the papers recently about how Agnes has a gold record of mine in her bathroom, and Rose doesn't. So I'm staying out of that one. The name Summoner comes from the sort of medieval summoner, and a summoner summoned you to court if you'd done something wrong, I suppose. So he's probably a local thug. That's the derivation of what a summoner is.
The love songs I've written have never really been straightforward, I love you and you love me. They've always had a little kick in them, a little twist of the knife somewhere, because that's what interests me. When I start writing I love you and you love me songs, then it's over, for me anyway. I think to write an original love song is more difficult than writing a political song, because that has been 99% of the subject matter of most songs since songwriting began. It's been about love. And yet, both require the same tools. You need a metaphor, you need a good tune, you need a structure that works. I never begin a song unless I have a metaphor. I don't start with a good first line. I start with a whole idea in my head about what the song is going to be about, and I work backwards from that point.
Like I love you, I would walk away in shame. I'd move town, I'd change my name. When he watches you, when he comes to buy your soul, on your hand is golden rings, like he owns a bird that sings. When we dance, angels will run and hide their wings. Priest has said my soul's salvation, soon the balance of the angels underneath the wheels of passion. I keep the faith in my fashion. When we dance, angels will run and hide it.
think any artistic endeavor, whether it's painting graffiti on walls or building Stonehenge or painting the Last Supper or writing a song or a poem, is really, yeah, it's about death. It's about life, you know. The two are intertwined. It's about making some statement before you go, making your mark, you know. We have all of these strategies, and it's important for all of us to express ourselves as human beings. We're here for a purpose. My purpose is to write songs, and other people's purpose is something else. I had a very curious dream, maybe 7 or 8 years ago, where I looked under my shirt and there was an enormous wound in my chest, this great big stab wound in my chest, and there was a flower growing from this wound, you know. And my mother was in the dream. She came into the room, but she had a sword in her hand, and in the dream, she was the one who wounded me, you know. So I woke up, you know, in a sweat, and trying to figure out what this one's about, you know. But I decided to write the images down in a song and hopefully try and make some sense of them. I still haven't, really. I don't want to get into whatever it meant with my deep psychology, but it was such a powerful, vivid set of images that I felt it had to mean something. It had to have some resonance somewhere. But a lot of people have responded to those images. My nearest experience of death really has been the death of my parents. They weren't terribly old when they died. And spending time with them before they went was important. I remember sitting with my father and holding his hand, you know, and we had identical hands. And I said, look, I've never noticed this before, but we have this. He told me, well, you've made better use of your hands than me. And I realized that was the first compliment he'd really paid me. And there was a lot of stuff between us that was kind of resolved in that little statement there. I feel very strongly that we all need to rehearse death in a way, so that, you know, it's one of the most natural things that one can do. Being born and dying are very natural things. So why not try and rehearse it? Why not try and practice it almost? I think, you know, the old religions did that. The Sufis did that. They practiced dying. So you could die well. You could die courageously or without fear. I think to fear death is to fear life, really. I'm not saying I've cracked this one yet. You know, I still worry when I get in an airplane. I mean, there is a long tradition of songs about death, from the mawkish to the sacred, and we have a whole pantheon of rock stars who have died in their prime. You know, who all more or less subscribe to this kind of myth of the dying artist, you know, the dying hero. There's a sort of romantic element to, you know, the sort of Death of Chatterton kind of romance about a young death, or the James Dean idea, or the Kurt Cobain idea. This is something I've never subscribed to. I don't want to belong to that clique. I like to live. I want to be an old man when I die, not young and beautiful. I'd like to believe in reincarnation. I'd like to subscribe in the idea that we can karmically come back as something better, something more evolved, in a world that's more evolved. But culturally and intellectually, I find it difficult to accept. You know, I look at my children and I see myself reincarnated in them, and I'd hope to see my grandchildren have the same blueprint, you know. My philosophy is one might as well live as if reincarnation is true. It's a nice idea. A lot of people think Fragile is some sort of ecological hymn to the fragile earth, but it's not. The song was written about a man called Ben Linda, who was an American Peace Corps worker in Nicaragua, who was shot by the Contras. I thought that was a wonderful irony that this young idealistic American was shot by a US-funded organization of basic gangsters, you know. And I basically wrote about that irony and that sadness. Nothing Like the Sun didn't start out to be an album about anything. I came up with this bunch of songs, maybe 10 or 12 songs. And it was only later that I realized that a lot of the songs were about women, but not just women as romantic objects, women as advisors, women as companions, as mothers, sisters. Very therapeutic record for me to make. I mean, my mother had just died, so I suppose I was obsessed by the idea of, you know, the female, and how was I going to replace her, you know. I went through a pretty fallow time in around about 89, 90. I had no idea what to write about. It was my job to write songs, but I really had no clue as to what area I should write about. So I thought, well, I better write about me. I better try and figure out where I've come from, who I am. And so my thoughts went back to my hometown, my upbringing, my life as a child, you know. And I just started to write down a series of images that were meaningful to me, you know, ships, rivers, old churches, a decaying industrial economy, an area rich in historical artifacts and ruins, a very cold wind from the Baltic, a tradition of seafaring and shipbuilding and coal mining and dysfunctional families and drinking and pride. All of those things were kind of came flowing out. Once I decided that that's what I was going to write about, it almost wrote itself.
church tower where the seagulls play. Saw the sad, shy horses walking home in the sodium light. Two priests on a ferry, October geese on a cold winter's night. All this time, the river flowed endlessly to the sea. Two priests came round our house tonight. One young, one old, offer prayers for the dying to serve the final rites. One to learn, one to teach which way the cold wind blows. And fussing and flapping in priestly black like a murder of crows. All this time, the river flowed endlessly to the sea. If I had my way, take a boat
Ships are very powerful symbols in your psychology, particularly mine. You know, they symbolize travel. They symbolize death in a way. They're like massive coffins. They also like upside-down churches, if you think about it. Or maybe a church is an upside-down ship. They carry you to different places. In ancient symbology, that the ship would carry you to the underworld or the next world or whatever. Whether any of this was sinking into my psychology as a child, I do not know. I mean, maybe this is something I've learned since. But it was a very powerful symbol to be brought up next to this enormous ship that would blot out the sun and be much taller than the houses, 3 or 4 times the size of your house. And then it would be gone, never to come back. The ship would be too big to come back to port. Well, it wasn't intentional to make birds symbolic, but they are traditionally symbolic of death. Birds on the roof of a house mean there's going to be a death in the house. So I'm not sure whether I put those birds in deliberately or whether they just sort of appeared there by accident. The song is lighthearted in many ways. It sounds lighthearted, and yet the subject matter is kind of odd and a little dark. It's really about the singer's wanting to bury his father, but bury him at sea and not in the traditional way of burying him in a churchyard. He wants to escape all of that. He wants to escape culture, basically, the rituals of his culture. And there are priests in the song, you know. The guy's lost his faith in the church. He doesn't think that the rituals that they serve up are adequate for what he wants to express about his father. It's quite a complicated, there's a lot of stuff in this song about history and faith and death. I don't know whether it works as a song. The whole thing kind of came to me in a flash, you know. The song all this time was really about trans. The song is lighthearted in many ways. They tore down my house, and the shipyard is closed. It closed last year. There weren't enough orders, and it was a very sad day for the town because we were obviously very proud of that heritage, you know, of shipbuilding, hundreds of years, and now it's gone. The coal mine's shut, so maybe the nature will take the town back. I'm very proud of my upbringing. I'm proud of where I come from. I come from a pretty tough town. At the same time, to find myself, I needed to leave. I needed to go into the world. I'm glad I did that. I have no regrets about that. At the same time, I have a great deal of affection and love for the place I came from. This is the Tyne Bridge. This was actually the prototype for the Sydney Harbour Bridge. It's a smaller version of the Sydney Harbour Bridge, but they wanted to make sure that this design would work, so they built it across the Tyne, and it still works. Well, that's the quayside. They have a Sunday market there, every Sunday, of course, and it's a great market. I used to go there as a child. That's the high-level bridge and the new suspension bridge, which is kind of ugly. And this is the gentrification of the river. As the sort of industrial basis of the town evaporates, it's becoming more and more tidy and something like gentrified. Wallsend is the town I'm from, and it was called Wallsend because it's the end of Hadrian's Wall. It's where they finished it. What puzzled me is why the Scottish people didn't just go around it, you know, go to Tynemouth and come around it. They're trying to rebuild the Roman wall here in this picture. I think these are excavations under the house where I used to live that was knocked down, and they found this Roman camp. Yeah, this was the view out of my window as a child of lots and lots of cranes, many more cranes than this, because over the last 20 years the shipyard has kind of run down to the point now where it's totally closed. It's gone. 200 years of industrial history have just been vanished. This is Tynemouth Castle at the mouth of the Tyne. I think it was inhabited by monks a lot of the time, and they were invaded by the Danes, and I think Henry VIII actually burned it down.
during the Reformation, but it's a magnificent ruin. We used to play in there as children. I think I lost my virginity on this pier here. Underneath it, there's a tunnel, very dark tunnel down there. I've fallen off these cliffs many a time. This is a tombstone, weathered by the sea. God knows how old that is. My first wedding, my first marriage happened in a church just down the hill here from the castle, overlooking the river. Okay, this is my school, and it looks pretty horrific. And my memories of it are that it was pretty horrific. It looks like a Gothic nightmare that Vincent Price should have inhabited. I did try going back once, but I got scared again. I got very afraid. I got very anxious. My mouth was dry, my stomach was heaving, and I left. Now, these were my classrooms. There were 1,000 boys in my school. It's actually a good school, but it was just a very daunting place. Guildhall. I used to play here on every Sunday morning. This is on the quayside with a big band, the 25-piece big band, and I think we made about £5 each every Sunday, which at the time in the 70s was quite a bit of money. You could buy lunch for that for 2 people, and we were always drunk. I mean, it didn't sound very good at all, but it was always packed with students, and we used to play Count Basie arrangements and Duke Ellington arrangements badly, but I learned a lot with that band, mainly how to drink. This is the Gosforth Hotel. There's a little room upstairs here that this big band used to play in originally, and I inherited the venue for a band called Last Exit. We play there Wednesday nights. We charge something like 20p to get in, and again there was a 4-piece band. We made about £5 each, and there was no stage at the time. We just used to play in a corner of the bar on the floor, all plug into one amplifier. People liked it. There's a lot of bingo in Newcastle. I was a bingo caller in the Spanish City in it's a sort of amusement park in Whitley Bay, and we used to affect Cockney accents to call a bingo. Say, house is called, don't move your markers, wait for the check. Was she worth it? 7 and 6. Doctor's orders, number 9. That kind of thing. Kelly's Eye, number 1. Newcastle is called Newcastle because it's actually a new castle. There was a previous one, and then they built this new one, which I don't know the date. It was probably something like 11th century. And it's a Norman keep, and I've never been in it, actually. It's right in the centre of town. It's the sort of thing you kind of ignore, but that's what the town's named after. I'm very proud of my upbringing. I'm proud of where I come from. I come from a pretty tough town. At the same time, to find myself, I need I suppose I Burn For You is about sexual frustration. I actually wrote this song when I was a school teacher. I used to set my kids very difficult essays to write in class, and I'd sit in the corner of the room and play my guitar. My sexual frustration had nothing to do with the pupils, I hasten to add, but yeah, I wrote it in the classroom.
I burn for
If You Love Somebody, Set Them Free was written as an antidote to the song Every Breath You Take. Every Breath You Take was about obsessive surveillance of the loved one to the point of paranoia. I wanted to write a song that was the opposite. But both songs are kind of ambiguous because Every Breath You Take has a kind of seductive and romantic side to it, which a lot of people responded to. A lot of people think it's their song. A lot of couples think it's their song. I don't know what kind of relationship they have, but to me it's a very dark song. And some other people would find If You Love Somebody, Set Them Free quite sinister. But I enjoy that. It's whatever you make of it. Be Still My Beating Heart is about trying to suppress emotion, trying to deny what's going on in your emotional life for the sake of sanity. It's a very uptight kind of song, but again, some people thought it's very romantic. I don't think it's romantic, it's the opposite of romantic.
I'll be taken for a fool. No earthly church has ever blessed our union.
The secret marriage was my way of trying to justify or rationalize why I wasn't married to a woman I'd lived with for 10 years. My justification was that we were already married in a way, that we expressed our vows to each other every day, and it wasn't a big public ceremony. But it wasn't until our kids sort of got to around the age of 9 and 10 that they needed to have some sort of public demonstration that we were married. So it was their idea that we got married in a very public way. So our marriage is no longer a secret, it's official. Mad About You Again is a song about obsession and jealousy and lust. I like to say it's about King David and Bathsheba. King David fell in love with another man's wife and decided to get rid of the other man by sending him off to war. I think he lived to regret it in the end. But I've always liked that story. And the Bible is full of lust and bad stuff.
I'm mad about you. I'm mad about you. You remember me when the west wind moves upon the fields of barley.
Barley fields look particularly picturesque and the wind blowing across them. I remember walking out with my wife in the fields and thinking how the wind caressing the top of the barley heads was very like a lover's caress. My mind started working and came back home and I sat with this idea and I wrote Fields of Gold very quickly. It was a very easy song to write, it kind of wrote itself. The best ones always do.
This is the story of 7 brothers.
Love is Stronger Than Justice. I'm not sure I'm quite serious about this, but maybe I am. I might be saying that sex is actually more powerful than almost anything, even ethics. This is a song about 7 brothers. Sort of doubling as the Magnificent Seven. They save a town from Mexican bandits, as in the film. And the mayor promises them a wife each, so they can be 7 brides for 7 brothers, which is another quote. But there's only one woman in the town, it turns out, and so the protagonist of the song decides he has to kill his brothers to win the maiden, and he does that, of course, and has a nice happy family at the end of the story, and everything's great, except he's killed his brothers. It's a perverse song. When We Dance is what I call a triangular love song, in that it's not I love you and you love me and isn't everything wonderful, it's I love me, he loves you, and you're not sure, you know. When there are 3 people involved in a relationship, it's much more interesting from the outside. It's 3-dimensional. The other kind of love song is, you know, it's a closed circle. It's not that interesting to anybody else. I like that idea of relationships that don't quite match. I suppose it's a song about adultery or illicit love or whatever you want to call it. I'm not making any moral observations about that. Just as a writer, it's an interesting thing to observe.
When we dance, angels moon and high.
from Jerusalem. He deals the cards as a meditation.
The Shape of My Heart is about a card player who plays poker, but he plays for kind of esoteric reasons. Or maybe that's what he's telling himself. Because playing cards are based on the old tarot deck, and the origins of the tarot deck are very obscure. Some people say that they're from Egypt or further back to India. Clubs, for example, are the wands on the tarot deck. Diamonds are the discs in the tarot deck. Hearts are the cups in the tarot deck. Swords are spades. And so in the chorus I say, I know the spades are the swords of a soldier. I'm just really repeating that piece of arcane information.
I know that the spades are the swords of a soldier.
Sex-crazy pop millionaire Sting is set to turn his back on the pop charts and head instead for the moon. For the love bonkers former Tyneside school teacher is planning a journey into space in order to improve his sexual performances, and that despite the fact that he is already better at having sex than anyone else in the world. Screw nutty Sting, who has admitted he can do it for up to 5 hours without going off, puts his amazing success at knobbing down to yoga exercises, which he and his actress wife Trudy Styler do every day. But the 42-year-old shag buff believes he can improve his lovemaking technique by practicing special weightless sex in space. It goes on. I believe that there are levels of consciousness. I think rocks have a certain level of consciousness. You see, if everything on the planet is carbon-based, including us, then there is some kind of hierarchy of consciousness. And we seem to be at the top of the tree in that regard. The animals slightly below us, and plants slightly below that, and rocks below that. But if there's this hierarchy, why should we be the top? Maybe there's something above us, something transcendent. I have no proof either way. But I think it's important to keep asking those questions. I think it's wrong to say, well, that's it. We are the sum total of everything. It worries me sometimes that people get stuck in a loop of what they consider to be listenable. They like a certain type of music, whether it's heavy metal music or country and western music or folk music or rock and roll. Everything else is not music to them. It's just that little category of music that they like is fine. My musical faith is involved in the whole spectrum of what music is. The essence of music is actually beyond all of those categories. They're all artificial anyway, and as far as I'm concerned, they don't really exist. You can't split up into various sects and be genuinely religious. It doesn't work that way. It's universal. If I'm ever asked if I'm religious, I always reply that yes, I'm a devout musician. Music puts me in touch with something beyond the intellect, something otherworldly, something sacred. How is it that some music can move us to tears? Why is some music indescribably beautiful?
I never tire of hearing Samuel Barber's Adagio for Strings, or Foray's Pavan, or Otis Redding's Dock of the Bay. These pieces speak to me in the only religious language I understand. They induce in me a state of deep meditation, of wonder. They make me silent. It's very hard to talk about music in words. Words are superfluous to the abstract power of music. We can fashion words into poetry so that they are understood the way music is understood, but they only aspire to the condition where music already exists. Music is probably the oldest religious rite. Our ancestors used melody and rhythm to co-opt the spirit world to their purposes, to try and make sense of the universe. The first priests were probably musicians. The first prayers, probably songs. So what I'm getting around to saying is that as musicians, whether we're successful, playing to thousands of people every night, or not so successful, playing in bars or small clubs, or not successful at all, just playing alone in the apartment to your cat, we are doing something as musicians that can heal souls, that can mend us when our spirits are broken. Whether you make $1 million or not 1 cent, music and silence are priceless gifts. May you always possess them, and may they always possess you. As I was doing that film, as I was making the video for If I Ever Lose My Faith in You, I was on this kind of wheel, and I was whirling around. There were kind of crucifixes going around my head, and I was wondering, what the hell does this mean? I have no idea. I think this was the director's idea. I really am not taking much responsibility for that. I think it was a cool visual image, but no, it doesn't have any particular meaning. The song "If I Ever Lose My Faith in You" is a statement about, I suppose, my beliefs, and that I'd lost a lot of faith in institutions that were designed to sustain us, you know, like government, church, television, and yet I still maintain a faith in life itself. You know, I still have a sense of hope and a sense of optimism, even though it's harder to define than the things I have lost faith in. So I define very carefully the things I have lost faith in, and then define quite vaguely what I keep faith in. There are things that are sacred. But there are also things that are so strong and powerful that any amount of irreverence will not damage them one bit. Always suspicious about organizations that seem very brittle and very reactive to criticism. And I think, well, how strong is your faith? You know, if you think a little pinprick like this can destroy you. So no. I like being irreverent, but I also like being reverent. I think everything has a time and place. The cliche of the pop idol is something I've tried to avoid. Occasionally I've failed to avoid it and always regretted it, but I don't feel I evoke in people a kind of fanatical response. I don't have a sort of cult following. I don't have legions of people trying to look like me or emulate me or chase me around the streets. If anything, it's the opposite. I live a very normal life because I want to. So I don't feel that I'm deified like a lot of rock stars are, you know. And they become trapped in that. They can't really move, you know, they can't go anywhere. Too afraid because people's response to them is too hysterical. I just don't have that. I don't have people screaming at me. I don't actually want it. I think to have faith in nothing at all is to run pretty close to madness. I think insanity is very close behind if you are totally nihilistic about everything. I mean, there's a certain sort of latter 20th century existentialist who, believes in nothing, he's just a dark figure in a raincoat. It's kind of a romantic image which we've adopted in the cinema and other places, but I don't want to be that person. I don't think that's terribly helpful. You got to believe in something. Flattened fifth was an interval that was banned by the church. Fifth is... It's a fifth. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. A flat five sounds like this. This is a disturbing interval called a tritone in musical terms. It's my favorite interval, but my music is full of tritones. I suppose, if I was a composer in the 11th century or the 10th century, I wouldn't be, burned at the stake for such offenses. I believe that right behavior is logical and the opposite is illogical. I think to live the proper way has its own reward, and to live the wrong way has its own punishment. So karmic, really.
Are you all set? You up? Okay. One, two, three, four.
Say I was a lost man in a lost world. Gentle Mary, weakly bow her head. To me be as it pleaseth God, she said. My soul shall own and magnify His holy name. Most highly favored Lady, of her Emmanuel the Christ was born. Is Bethlehem all on a Christmas morn, and everyone throughout the world will ever say, most highly favored Lady.
So I've been doing yoga for about 5 years. I'm not any kind of expert. I'm just a beginner. It's a lifetime practice that you can do until you're an octogenarian or older. The kind of yoga I do is called Ashtanga yoga, which is fairly physical, and it's really about breathing. The movements are a side issue, really. What it really is about is heating the body through very fast breathing. There's a series of movements, one follows the next one very scientifically, so the body gradually opens throughout the session. It takes about an hour to do all of the movements. And it's an addiction almost. You have to do it every day. Once you start, you can't stop. It's a good addiction though, I think. It is essentially a religious practice as an aid to meditation, to put your mind, I suppose, in an alpha state, with through exhaustion in my case. With the breathing, you just enter a different space, and then you can sit and meditate in the lotus position. And meditation really is thinking about nothing, just breathing and being, I suppose. It's very relaxing. I think we have a tendency in the West just to think too much. Our brains are constantly ping-ponging from one idea to the next, and round and round and round. So it's good to switch the mind off sometimes if you can. And this does help. I don't think our modern society is really geared up for anything except the end result, which is consumer fetishism. You know, just buying product. You know, that's our standard of living. That's our quality of life. You know, that we can buy products. It's not enough. It's really not enough, and I think we're in for a shock if we think that is enough. We all need to reassess our place not in society, but in the universe. You know, what are we? Are we creatures that just, you know, drive cars and make cars and buy them and make televisions and make TV shows, and what are we doing? I'm not sure. But I don't think it's adequate. Whatever we're doing isn't adequate for our sanity. I don't think our modern society is really geared up for anything except the end result, which is consumer fetishism. You know, just buying product. You know, that's our standard of living. That's our quality of life. You know, that we can buy products. It's not enough. It's really not enough, and I think we're in for a shock if we think that is enough. We all need to reassess our place not in society, but in the universe. You know, what are we? Are we creatures that...
Well, the Rainforest Foundation began with the demand of indigenous leaders in the Amazon to demarcate a vast area of rainforest which was their homeland traditionally for thousands of years. They came to Sting and his wife Trudy Styler and asked him for help to do that. And the Rainforest Foundation was born out of the effort to obtain support around the world to win that fight, the fight of Chief Rowney and other Kayapo leaders in the Amazon.
I really don't want to get into painting an idealistic picture of indigenous people, because they're humans just like us with weaknesses and flaws. At the same time, because of their relationship to their environment, because it's so symbiotic and so balanced, at least ideally, I think there's more sanity in their society than there is in ours. We don't really have any responsibility to our environment. We don't really know where things come from. We don't know how they were made or where they were manufactured or who was brutalized to make them. Whereas in a primitive society, you know exactly which tree your food came from, or which plant your food came from, or where you brought your tools from. So you're much closer to a state of responsibility and sanity.
Well, the Rainforest Foundation began with the demand of indigenous leaders in the Amazon to demarcate a vast area.
To silently protest, it's very hard to react in a male way against that. You can't really send troops in against women who are dancing. I mean, Gandhi was a man who used a similar approach, non-violent protest, of just coming limp in the face of oppression and saying, you are the oppressor. That is much more powerful than fighting a terrorist war against the oppressor. I think terrorists the world over are beginning to realize that you're trapped in this karmic cycle of violence and revenge. The female approach is much smarter and probably more effective, at least in certain situations. think any artistic endeavor, whether it's painting graffiti on walls or building stone,
blood will flow, the flesh and steel are one, drying in the color of the evening sun. Tomorrow's rain will wash the stains away, but something like mine will always stay. Perhaps this final act was meant to clinch your lifetime's argument. From violence, and nothing ever could. For those born beneath an angry star, lest we forget how fragile we are. On and on the rain will fall, like tears from a star, like tears from a star.
Good morning. I'm glad you made it. I've been reviewing your cards. Would you like to know more about the tarot? The tarot is an ancient system of knowledge that is used to gain clarity and a broader perspective on one's life. The cards before you are laid out in a traditional Celtic cross spread. The Celtic cross is the oldest and most widely used tarot formation, and is one of the ways to get a handle on the various aspects of one's life at any particular moment in time. Now let me see what your cards have to say. The cards speak of change and transformation. As a user of new technology, this concept is not unfamiliar to you. Well, is it? Well, morphing is more than a digital concept, it's a law of nature. The moon turns from full to dark and back again. A snake sheds its skin. A cocoon splits open to reveal a caterpillar with wings. Change is inevitable. my thoughts this evening. I walked on the banks of time. I wondered how I could win you. Oh, if I could make you mine. Oh, if I could make you mine. The window was so insistent with tales of a stormy south. When I spied two birds in a sycamore tree, came my dryness in my mouth. Came my dryness in my mouth. For then without rhyme or reason, two birds they rise up to fly. And where the two birds were flying, I swear I saw you and I swear I saw you and I. Good morning. I'm glad you made it. I've been reviewing your cards. Would you like to know more about the tarot? Then I won't explain a thing. I'll get right to your reading. Let me see. The cards speak of change and transformation. As a user of new technology, this concept is not unfamiliar.
surgeon's table. Take my fingerprints if you are able. Pick my brains, pick my pockets, steal my eyeballs and come back for the sockets. Run every kind of test from A to Z, and you still know nothing about me. Run my name through your computer, mention me in passing to your college shooter. Check my records, check my